afternoon. This is Obsidian Anubis, and yes, I am back with another 9th Age battle report. I know it has been some time, but between life, quarantine, and extreme laziness, I haven't gotten around to posting any videos lately, but me and my opponent did do a game a few weeks ago, and so here it is for you. So this is Empire of the Sunstall versus Dread Elves, 4,500 points. This is after the points update. However, my opponent did not like the new direction that the Dread Elf army book went, so they are playing it in the old configuration with the command being 10 points instead of 20 points. So if we look at my opponent, on their far right flank, my left flank, there's a group of Dancers of Yema and a Hydra. Next to them is a big block of Judicators. Behind them is a BSB. Then there's a Medusa there in the center, the General on a Dragon, a group of Auxiliary Legionnaires, a block of Dread Legionnaires, and a second Medusa hiding behind the hill. And then on the far right, a second group of Auxiliary Legionnaires and some Warlocks. And I think there is a Wizard Adept in with the Dancers of Yema as well. So if we switch to my army, on my right flank, I have a group of 5 Readers, which you can see there. This is after Vanguard. Behind them, I have a group of Knights. In that front left corner, you can see is a Wizard who's mounted on a horse. To the left of them on the hill, I have a Steam Tank, which is being proxied by my altar. To the left of that, I have one group of 15 Light Infantry with crossbows. To the left of them, I have a big block of Halberdiers. And with that unit, I have a BSB in the far right corner and an Inquisitor in the far left corner. To the left of them, I have a second group of 15 Light Infantry with crossbows. And then to the left of them, I have a big block of Flagellants, and with them is my General, who is a Prelate. Behind them is a Wizard on a Pegasus, or in this case, a floating chair. And to the left of them, I have 3 Elephants with full command, and then on the far left-hand flank, I have 5 more Riders. So turn 1 between the Empire of Sunstall and Dread Elves. So this is after both movements. So you can see that my opponent moved up fairly aggressively, especially on the left-hand flank. You can see that the objective is hold the center. So there's that tombstone there in the center of the battlefield, which marks the center. And then over here on the right flank is a little bit more conservative. You can see that I've managed to dwindle down that second group of Auxiliary Legionnaires down to just 5 or 6 models. I kind of brought my Knights around to start threatening inward. I believe my second group of Riders on the side has been shot off by the Warlocks through magic. But other than that, just a lot of subtle movement on the right-hand flank. So if we move to turn 2, so here you can see that I've kind of started to bring in my right flank to kind of close off my opponent's left flank, bringing the Knights around heavy, the Steam Tank, and then bringing my heavy infantry within 6 inches of the middle token so they can start scoring. And then on the left-hand, and then on the left-hand side, you can see that my Flagellants have charged into the Medusa, which they butchered and then overran into the the Dread Judges / Judicators, but we didn't fight that until my opponent's next turn. So when we switch to turn 3, you can see that my opponent countercharged with the Hydra in the flank, the Dragon General in the front. I believe my opponent also used the breath weapon. And then on the far left-hand side, you can see my opponent brought their BSB kind of around to flank or to challenge my Elephants. The Dancers chased after my Riders and actually managed to catch them. I rolled fairly decent, but my opponent rolled even better than I did on 2 dice versus 3 dice and managed to catch them, but is now kind of way out of position. My opponent also had some Harpies that came in on the battlefield at this turn. So this is my opponent's short edge that they could bring in reinforcements. So they had a unit of Harpies fly in. Moving to turn 4, you can see that my opponent blew through my Flagellants. However, I did do quite a few wounds. Looks like I did 3 wounds on the Hydra. I think I put a couple wounds on the General, and then I annihilated about half of the Judicators. I figured I would lose that, but since my guys could fight even after they died, it was a fairly even trade, I'd say. I would take that. You can see over here on the right flank that I'm still kind of just encircling. My left flank is now basically broken with my flagellants destroyed, but that's okay. I still have the secondary objective at the moment. My opponent hasn't brought any scoring units within range of the center token, so I've been gaining that. So on my turn, I charged my knights into my opponent's second unit of auxiliary legionnaires, and surprisingly, basically my knights flubbed. They got the Rebel Lance syndrome and hardly did anything. I killed a few, but I don't think I broke their steadfast. You can see that my opponent managed to kill one of my knights. So I didn't have an extra rank on them, and yeah, they just held high leadership, general being right there. So you can see that my opponent did pull back their dragon. I think that character has like 1 wound remaining, so they're kind of being a little cautious with it now. You can see that on the hill, my one group of light infantry have turned to face the other direction. They are shooting at the warlocks currently. So that brings us to turn 5 for my opponent. I'm going first. So they charge their Dread Legionnaires into my knights. They kind of brought their Hydra around behind my crossbowmen. So the Hydra did not use its breath weapon in the combat with the flagellants. The dragon did. So this photo is pre-breath weapon, and then this photo is post-breath weapon. You can see that they wiped out about 10 of my crossbowmen, but I did manage to pass my pattern test and actually stay there, surprisingly. So at this point, I have now gained the center token for 3 turns, so I now have the secondary objective, which my opponent can't claim at this point. Up in the top with the knights, it was more or less a slugfest. My opponent killed 2 of my knights. I killed a few of them. I think my opponent won combat, but I had my BSB and they managed to hold. So for turn 6, you can see my opponent's kind of coming in, kind of threatening. At this point, we were kind of facing off, deciding if we were going to go into combat with one another, and we basically just both decided that we'd probably not go into combat. I backed up a little bit. My opponent moved forward, but not enough to really get into a charging range. You can see that the Hydra did move into the back of my crossbowmen and wipe them out. However, you notice that the general on the dragon is no longer in this picture. My steam tank managed to hit it with its cannon and do the last wound and wipe it out. And then in combat with the Dread Legionnaires, you can see I lost a few more knights, but on my opponent's turn, I held. When we got to my turn for the last half turn of the game, I lost a couple more knights and I actually broke from combat. However, I fled and my opponent did not catch me. Not that it actually really mattered since I was fleeing at this point and I couldn't rally them, so my opponent still did pretty well. So that was the end. It was a pretty fun game. It's been a while since we played it, so I don't remember all the details, but you can see that my opponent did fairly well at wiping out most of my force. I still have my my heavy infantry block there, with 2 characters, and it never got into combat. And my steam tank, I think, is still fully healthed up. I don't think it took any wounds. But I did lose my flagellants and my general. However, I did manage to kill my opponent's general on the dragon, so that definitely helped. When we counted up points, it ended up being an 8-12 in favor of my opponent, but I had this secondary objective, so it switched it to an 11-9. So a very small Empire victory for me. Overall, it was a fun game. We both really enjoyed it. My opponent is still having a hard time figuring out how to fight the steam tank. So in this case, basically just decided to not engage it, which is a strategy which might work. I was really disappointed with my knights. I thought charging 9 knights into a unit of 15 crossbows, I'd be able to blow through them and move out of range from getting countercharged. But yeah, my knights just kind of bounced off. It was quite disappointing. I have a lot of knight figurines, and I'm kind of cautious that I will probably not be able to play them a lot of the times because they really don't seem to be worth their point. But maybe that just requires a little bit more experimentation and a little bit more handling on my part. But overall, we really enjoyed it. This game was the prelude to a couple other games that we've actually been playing. So there will be hopefully at least 5 more games, as we have a 5-part campaign series coming up. Those of you who've watched other battle reports on my channel have known that I like to do thematic and campaign games. So the next 5 battles will all be part of our campaign, which is the spin-off from a campaign group of 5 battles that we did earlier. So you can go look back at those battle reports between the Dread Elves and the Empire of Songstall. I believe that for the future games, my opponent will stick with the older version of the Dread Elf Army book, with just reducing the command down to 10 points each instead of 20. But they aren't a huge fan of all the changes that they made with the Dread Elves, so we'll probably stick with the older version. But overall, that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm sorry it wasn't a fully pictured battle. It's been a while since I took pictures, and I kind of forgot to take some. But I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. If you have any comments or questions, please put those in the comment section below. And as always, hit like and subscribe. Game on.